G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you. Our guest today is Alex de Vries-Gao, a data scientist at DNB. He's a researcher at the VU Amsterdam and the founder of Digiconomist. He's passionate, as you'll see today, about climate change and the energy consumption of emerging tech like Bitcoin, AI, cryptocurrencies and the like. We're really excited to have Alex on the show to talk about his research in Bitcoin and AI and data center usage, why we need to upgrade to smart energy grids, and whether the world really understands the environmental cost of our addiction to technology. Let's dive in. Let's get started then with your origin story. How did you get interested in Bitcoin? If you could take us back when you first heard about it or first got interested in it.
Yeah, man, that goes a long way back because actually I started with Digiconomist, my own blog, back in 2014. And that was originally a blog about the risk of investing in crypto assets. And I was working in the banking industry at the time, and I kind of just needed a hobby. And I figured, like, okay, cryptocurrencies are interesting, but they're a bit risky. You know, there's lots of scammers and other things trying to get your money in this space. So let's try to raise some awareness about that. And then at some point I read a media article myself that said, like, hey, hold up, a single Bitcoin transaction is using as much power as a US household over the course of 1.5 days. And I was thinking, like, okay, that's pretty crazy. 1.5 days worth of power for a single transaction. Why is no one talking about that? And by the way, now we're talking about the year 2016 when I read this message. It was from 2015. And I started figuring, like, okay, you know, if this is so massive, people should be talking about it. The most recent research I could find at the time was like 2014, and it was like really bad, not really offering any specific insights, massive ranges on the potential power consumption of the Bitcoin network. And so I figured, like, okay, I can do better. I can come up with better numbers, and I can make this more transparent on a daily basis. So that's what I set out to do, and that's when I launched the Bitcoin Energy Consumption Index, which you can still find today on the Digiconomist website. And it's basically providing you with a daily update on sustainability metrics of Bitcoin, like energy consumption, and later on I added carbon emissions, water consumption, electronic waste. It wasn't until the end of 2017 that really took off. That was the first Bitcoin bubble. So Bitcoin went up to 20,000 for the very first time. And along with that, the energy consumption of the Bitcoin network, because those are the Bitcoin price is very closely related to ultimately energy consumption of the network, simply because the more valuable Bitcoin becomes, the more miners can earn, the more resources they employ for mining. It's that simple. So that's when we saw the first big boom in energy consumption of the Bitcoin network. And then I started getting questions because I was hosting some numbers about this. The media started to pick up on it. I got a request if I could write for an academic paper about this topic as well. I wasn't doing a PhD at the time, but I was thinking, like, okay, why not? I mean, let's give it a try. And then I never really stopped researching this topic from then on. So, like I said, I've been diving into this topic for almost a decade now, covering various dimensions of sustainability of Bitcoin. I already mentioned carbon emissions, electronic waste, water consumption. Published over 10 academic articles on this subject. It's become part of now my PhD. So I started doing a PhD for real in the meanwhile on this topic, the sustainability of emerging technologies, in particular, of course, crypto assets, and more recently, artificial intelligence. But yeah, that's pretty much, not exactly in a nutshell, but that's what I've been doing for the past decade.
Yeah, man. So originally, so I'm just trying to like piece that back together from the beginning. Originally, you were interested in Bitcoin, at least you saw it as an opportunity to think about, you know, the emerging digital economy maybe, and commenting on it there. And then as you saw about the energy usage, for example, you thought, oh man, it's a massive story that very few people are talking about. How else have you engaged with blockchain technologies generally or cryptocurrencies specifically? Is there any interest there anymore on that, maybe academic, economic side, or is it mostly now on that energy usage for emerging and new technology side?
Well, my research has always been on the sustainability side, very focused. I must say, I have when this was going on, I was working at a Big Four consulting company, and I was doing a lot of things with blockchain, like telling customers what they can and especially cannot do with blockchain technology.
Uh-huh.
That it does not something that's covered in my research. My research is really focused purely on the sustainability side of things, and I personally, it's quite obvious that I have a big concern about climate change in general, how it's going to affect the planet and well everyone on it living on it. So I figured this was the biggest untold story to be focusing at.
So was that the kind of pivot point for you when you thought, oh man, working for the Big Four, maybe expertise in economics, and then you see this big problem with a big need and global ramifications. Was that the kind of thing that made you go, oh, I need to maybe focus less on what I have been doing and really go all in here? What was that moment like for you?
Well, to be honest, I've always been doing this on the side. So
Right.
even though I'm doing a full PhD and I'm still doing a lot of research, it's still something that I do on the side. So I have a regular full-time job as a data scientist 4 days a week, and then the remaining 3 days of the week I'm doing research. So I don't have a lot of free time as a result of this, but like I said, it's a hobby that got out of hand, so I am enjoying it. Well, or to a certain extent, the conclusions are always very bad. So
Well, yeah, that's
kind of make your make your
Just
stomach
say you're
turn. So
enjoying it, isn't it? When all the data points in a direction that's not particularly positive.
no,
Do you consider yourself then a climate crusader? Is the climate part of it the focus for you, and then or is it a future focus? And you're thinking about humans going forward, and then we kind of mark back and go, well, how do we actually make sure we get to the future? What is it that is kind of the primary concern for you? What matters most to you in that regard, I should say?
yeah, I think it's at the intersection of like how do we innovate and how do we do this in a responsible manner? Because this is actually becoming a pretty fundamental problem for emerging technologies where we are very excited about something new and we start applying it and we start throwing a whole heaps of money at it and other resources, energy, and how we kind of lose track on like, okay, but what else is this going to mean for example the planet? If we're going to be using a lot more electricity, then ultimately we're going to be using more fossil fuels. We're going to be increasing our carbon emissions, and that's going to have pretty wide consequences. So I like to make people take a little bit of a step back when it comes to emerging technologies and really think about like what is the problem you're really trying to solve and what's the best fit solution for that, and try to take out the buzz, so to say. You don't want to end up with a situation where you have this really fancy technology, but you really just it's like you're trying to shoot a fly with a bazooka. It just makes no sense at all. It could be even worse. I like that. It could be completely ineffective. You build this massive beast and it just doesn't do anything that you thought it would. And this is something that is really it's been part of how we innovate over the past decades. How we go fast, we break things, we don't really think about the consequences. It's been the mindset of certain companies, but I think it's better to sometimes slow down the pace a little bit and think about what we're doing.
Yeah, man, I was listening to a very well listened to US based podcast where they were saying, basically talking about the blockchain race and the artificial intelligence race between the US and China in particular, but then the rest of the world generally. And basically their answer was, we need more data centers and way more energy. And that was basically the biggest problem was China is building a stack of new power plants, and the United States needs them as well. And if they don't get them, if they don't have the energy, they won't actually be able to compete at that international level, or they'll be well overtaken. What is it that people on the technology side don't understand about? What would you like people on the technology side or the venture capital side or entrepreneurship side to understand about what you are finding out about? Can you talk us through some of the more interesting stats that you've found in the data? What have you learned? What's the high level stuff that we really should know before we race ahead, like you mentioned? What are some of the guardrails we should actually be putting in place before we do that, or as we do that?
Yeah, the sad part is for the tech industry, there is no benefit about slowing down the pace. This is ultimately part of a business model as well. If you hype this technology and you get everyone to invest in it, that's great for business. So I think this is a very tough to tackle fundamental issue where everyone in tech just wants to go really fast and push out these technologies and growth at any cost. And then there is this is happening in an environment where the regulatory pace cannot keep up. We also know this for a long time. Like, innovation happens much faster than regulators can keep up. So
there's incentives on that global scale as well. If like the United States is thinking, well, we don't want to get crushed by China and vice versa, and everybody else, and then there's other incentives in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're not really gonna get crushed by China on stuff like blockchain or artificial intelligence, like large language models. I mean, hell, blockchain was at some point gonna solve every problem we had. We thought about using blockchain for border controls and healthcare, and these are some of the most insane ideas we've ever seen. And of course, we aren't doing those things today. This was a hype. It was fun. We had a good laugh at it. Bitcoin itself was gonna make the financial system obsolete. Well, the financial system is still here today. The only thing that Bitcoin has managed to do is actually have or be responsible for more carbon emissions than the entire traditional financial system combined. But it plays not any meaningful role in the regular financial system. And now with AI, well, Apple just published a paper very recently saying like, oh, hey, hold up with these large language models. Everyone thinks they're awesome, but actually their reasoning completely fails. They constructed some new problems to solve for these models and figured that as soon as it gets a little bit complex, the models just completely collapse. Like they had 0% success rate. So that's actually a really terrible performance. They're very good at giving us the illusion that they're thinking, but in reality, it's really bad. So they're also not going to solve all of tomorrow's problems. And then, I think if this is the case, you don't really have to be worried that we're going to get crushed by China, because then in that case, they would also be, are they going to be crushing us with a technology that can't do very simple stuff? I wouldn't be too worried about that. But what is worrying is that we are taking this very serious, and how we are driving up the resources that we put in this technology very rapidly. We are expanding the infrastructure for this technology very rapidly. And we're just not, we can already start to see the consequences. I mean, before with cryptocurrency mining in just a few years, we actually saw Bitcoin mining becoming responsible for 0.5% of global electricity consumption by itself, out of nowhere, in just a few years' time. Now, artificial intelligence is popping up, and it's on track to surpass the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining this year. So then it would actually be responsible for half of data center electricity consumption globally, just AI. So these new technologies are really massively boosting the energy consumption of data centers. And if you hear like, okay, 0.5% or maybe 1%, and then AI and cryptocurrency mining combined, where's it going to end? Okay, few percent of global electricity consumption doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if you think about, for example, global aviation is responsible for around 2% of global carbon emissions at the moment, which also doesn't sound like a lot. But then again, if we talk about aviation, we think like, okay, this is big. So If you say like, okay, now the energy consumption of these new technologies, data centers in total, is going to have or be responsible for a similar amount of carbon emissions as global aviation, then suddenly it's a really big problem.
Yeah, man. Before we get onto solutions or a good path forward, to try to understand the problem, I guess, over the last 15 or so years, how are people, do you think, in the crypto or blockchain world, or even in the AI world these days, how are they engaging with this problem as you're presenting it? Do people, because I hear these stories come up every now and then, but often the retort is, oh, we'll just need better or cleaner, or we'll get fusion in the next couple of years, or we'll get more efficient somehow, and it won't be a problem. These are just teething issues. But if the pace is increasing and not decreasing, how are you finding people engaging with the kinds of problems that you're identifying?
Yeah, the concerns are very easily dismissed. You can actually just get these dismissals from the environmental reports of big tech companies, where they will write like, okay, our carbon emissions are bad. We have a net zero target for 2030, but our carbon emissions are going up rather than down. And now they only have half the time left to get to zero, and they have to deal with more carbon emissions than what they started out with. So, good luck with that. But it's all going to work out because this new technology is magically going to get us there in the next couple of years somehow. And they never specify how this is going to happen. There's a lot of wishful thinking involved here. There's no evidence that this technology is having any significant contributions anywhere at the moment. They often leave out rebound effects. So, if there's efficiency gains realized as a result of this technology, then it doesn't mean we're going to be using less resources, because it also typically leads to a situation where, because things are getting more efficient and getting cheaper, people started using more of the provided service. Oh, good. So the result is that in total, as a result of this dynamic, you can actually end up using more resources than what you started out with. At that point, we call it the Jevans Paradox. This is based on the economist William Jevans, who in the year 1865 observed that the production of coal was getting a lot more efficient, and then all of a sudden people started using a lot more coal, and in total we ended up using a lot more coal than before. So and efficiency gains in AI, for example, they are there, and they have been massive in the past few years. We've come up with, there've been tremendous gains in the hardware involved for building AI applications, and also major developments in the software. But what we see is that all these efficiency gains have actually been leveraged to make the models bigger. Because the thing with AI is bigger is better. So you make the models bigger, they will perform better. But the downside is bigger also then means more computational resources. And as these models are getting better, people also start using these models more. Now suddenly we have mass adoption of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT and all those other applications. And the energy consumption of AI is just going through the roof. Like this is literally, it's coming from like a very small part of data center electricity consumption. In just 3 years' time, we're going to be at half of data center electricity consumption. And this is amid all these efficiency gains that are taking place. So I think I would say this is already an example of a really massive Jevans paradox. So I wouldn't count on efficiency gains to make things better. If not, they can even be making it worse. So, like I said, there's a lot of wishful thinking. There's this ignorance of rebound effects that we have been observing really strongly in these past few years already. So I think there's not really a very easy excuse. Also, when you say like, okay, we're driving up power demand a lot at the moment. I mean, Bitcoin mining and AI combined, they're literally creating a new United Kingdom worth of power demand globally. Right? This is in just a time span of 7 years. They had this whole new massive energy demand, the size of a country like the United Kingdom just pops up, and we now have to supply that. And where does that power come from? It doesn't come from renewables, because the thing is, we are building out our renewable supply, but the thing is, we are prioritizing renewables as much as possible. So if we have a certain increase in power demand anywhere, then the effect of that is we're going to be using the infrastructure that we've been trying to get rid of the past few years, which is fossil fuel based. That's the one that's immediately available to satisfy all this the power demand that we're having. And okay, maybe at some point we'll get to 100% renewables, but it doesn't take it doesn't take a genius to see that timeline is automatically going to get longer if we kind of keep increasing the amount of resources we need. And all while this is happening, the climate damage just accumulates, and it's not like this will, if you stop releasing carbon emissions, this will just go away. This will stay in the environment for a very long time. So I think we have to be really careful about easily dismissing these concerns with, it will somehow be solved by this technology or this efficiency gain, or in the long run it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. And we're going to be either, we can either ensure that we have maybe had 2-degree global warming versus ending up with 3-degree global warming. And it's kind of sad that we already have to talk about these numbers, because if we had stopped using fossil fuels a lot sooner, we could have mitigated this a lot more.
Yeah, man. As we're thinking about, you mentioned that global AI energy consumption is about to tip the balance over global blockchain consumption. It seems to me that AI is on still a meteoric adoption curve compared to Bitcoin or blockchain, generally. Everything has AI attached or bolted on or at its core. And so surely this scale's going to tip wildly in favor, if you like, or weighted towards AI energy consumption. What is it that's worrying about AI and data center energy consumption? What is actually what's the chief worry there? I mean, you mentioned that, on that adoption curve, it gets more efficient, so more people will end up using it. So the net effect is more energy is used and you're actually compounding the problem. What else is worrying you about AI specifically and data center energy consumption generally?
Yeah. Well, one thing you mentioned just now is very interesting to keep in mind, that what we saw with cryptocurrency mining is probably just child's play with what we're now seeing with AI. And we're definitely seeing the growth curve in AI resource consumption is a lot steeper than is previously the case for cryptocurrency mining. And the main reason for this is that there's a lot of big money behind this. These cryptocurrency miners, they had to make do with a budget of 10 billion a year. And that's how they got to where they are today in terms of resource consumption. 10 billion, for the big tech companies, this is less than a quarter of profits. So now we're talking about big tech companies that are putting tens of billions in one go, even talking about hundreds of billions in some cases. This is a completely different order of magnitude in terms of resources, monetary resources involved in building out this infrastructure. So this means that the curve is a lot steeper, and also it's really hard to say where the limit is. In cryptocurrency mining, the limit is the amount of money that these miners are getting. They're not going to spend more on resources than they can make from mining. There's no other, these machines can't have any other, they can't do anything else. They physically only can mine Bitcoin. So it's not like you can generate any additional value from these machines apart from mining Bitcoin. Now, with AI, it's a very different story. It's very hard to say where the limit is. Well, you could say as much as these big tech companies are willing to spend on it, but then where is that? And they have very deep pockets. Just Apple.
I'm thinking about you made me think about the agentic future that many in the big tech realm are trying to push us towards, where it's not just about humans interacting with AI, but then it's AI agents or bots interacting with other AI agents and bots, and that's a almost infinite kind of pool of agents interacting with other agents that doesn't need any kind of human interaction. And so the demand, if they find meaningful things for those agents to do, or productive things for those agents to do, man, that could be still
Well, I mean,
greater than the current.
based on Apple's recent research, we should seriously question the extent of what those agents will be able to do for us, at least in the very near future, with the current models, because it seems like they're very limited. And of course, we're hearing these tech companies also talking about artificial general intelligence, and then some element is saying like, "Oh, we'll get to that point in a few thousand days." But a few thousand days, that could be decades. So, I think.
Do you think it's on a similar trajectory to blockchain then, where kind of came out the gate and had a really big hype cycle and then kind of died down, and I guess it's still growing and building. But like you said, there were many applications that people were touting blockchain is going to solve problems in these particular verticals, which it just hasn't at this stage, at least. Are you saying you think that,
and probably
with research is that AI is going to be similar?
Yeah, the problem is that people don't really realize the limitations of a certain technology. Like when it's all new, people get lost in the hype, and there are a lot of things that things like blockchain and artificial intelligence will never really be able to do. If you have a large language model at the moment, is never going to be able to solve really complex. So you need a different type of AI for that. So, but. These kind of things with any emerging technology is quite easily forgotten or completely ignored, and then we go through this very typical hype curve where at some point everyone's investing in it, things are going through the roof, and then all of the sudden everyone realizes like, okay, hold up, this technology is not delivering. There are some real limits to it, and that's the point when we start getting more real about what the technology can offer us, it cannot offer us, and then it just at that point it just goes into our toolbox, and we're like, okay, we know this technology exists and we can use it if we want, but we probably 9 out of 10 times or even less we won't be needing it. And I'm always encouraging people to get to that point a little bit faster by just always taking that step back. Don't get lost in the hype. Don't. I mean, if you have a certain technology and it's like a hammer, you start looking for nails. That's not the right way to be dealing with new emerging technologies. They're exciting, they sound fun, but they're never going to be a magic solution for anything, and it really helps to very early on in the process just take a step back. Like we actually see Apple doing this. They've been very reluctant to get into AI, and now they're releasing this paper and they're like, okay, this technology is not too impressive. They're keeping their cash mostly on the sideline, so they have more than 100 billion in cash sitting around. They're not going ahead, they're not panicking and putting all of this in AI. And of course, then there are other people saying like, oh, Apple is going to be left with a pile of cash, and they're going to completely miss where we're headed, and they will be obsolete in at some point. Well, but this is the fear of missing out that's also being created by this technology, and I think it's often pretty wise not to get completely lost in that fear of missing out. I mean, there might be some truth to it. I mean, in the past, we did see some tech companies out competing others simply because, they were fast, or first mover advantages were real. Actually, Bitcoin had a first mover advantage in the crypto world, and it's still number one. So, but at the same time, like I said, we need to find a balance. I think that's the trick, and that's really hard to do when there's so much noise in the background. Like everyone's pressuring you to get involved with this new technology. We somehow do have to be able. We should become able of doing this, because we also need to keep in mind that we are ultimately doing this on a planet with very finite resources, which is already not just stretched to its limits, but exceeding its limits. That's why we were seeing the effect of climate change nowadays in increasing fashion. So it's something that we really need to be very mindful about. But I really don't know what is going to be the perfect way to do it all. Especially, probably not the policies, because policymakers are always too slow. So how do we get this done?
So have you thought about that? Have you thought about how to, without just demanding altruism, how do you align incentives, not just among competing technology companies, but among global economic adversaries? How are we supposed to align incentives?
Yeah, well, the thing is that I don't even get to those questions most of the time, because what we tend to get stuck at, not just me but other researchers on this topic, is the limited transparency. So we're not getting the information we need to make proper assessments about these technology. I think this is a very big problem. This was the reason why, first of all, I got involved with highlighting the sustainability metrics of crypto mining, more recently artificial intelligence, because those big tech companies, they know exactly what they're doing with AI, and they know exactly how much resources are involved with that, but they are absolutely refusing to tell us. They're not telling us anything. So hey, if you read the recent environmental reports, for example, Microsoft you can do a word count. It contains the word AI 131 times, just in the main document. At the same time, they managed to say almost nothing about the environmental impact AI is having. So they are saying AI is driving up our power demand, but we're saving some power elsewhere. And then you can see in their data that they are indeed posting a significant increase in their total power demand. But how much is that? How much is really related to AI? They will not tell us. Okay. They talk about the supply chain emissions as being the biggest source of their carbon emissions. They talk about semiconductor manufacturing being a concern, since that's taking place in East Asia, where all of these power grids are relying on fossil fuels. Taiwan, Japan, South Korea. All AI chips are essentially manufactured there. But they don't break it down. They don't even give us a regional breakdown of their supply chain emissions. So we can't even say, we'll see what is happening in Asia and what's happening elsewhere. So we're completely lost what's happening with regard to AI in these environmental reports. And if these tech companies are not telling us, then down the line, how are you as a user of this technology supposed to make responsible decisions with regard to this technology? Also, as a policymaker, if you're not getting any information, what are you going to be basing your policies on? So the thing I'm usually advocating for is not some really massive policy for getting people to I don't even know, Amy. I just want the data to be available in the first place before you can start thinking about how the follow-up actions, and there can be a whole lot. I mean, you can say like, okay, if we have data, then you can start thinking like maybe should be put stuff like carbon taxes or have some other kind of measure to deal with this development, or like how do we want to mitigate it? But you can't think about how to mitigate something if you don't know what you're trying to mitigate. So we need numbers.
Sure.
So
the aligning of incentives might actually then lead to better data. So if there's some way to actually bring people on board with, if, for example, again, the incentive was, there's a real threat to the globe, to humanity and to our future, and that was something that people actually took seriously, perhaps, that would be something then the people would say, we need to actually change how we behave in order to meet the challenge.
The big tech environmental reports at the moment currently really scream that they are prioritizing growth in this technology over the environment.
I'm not suggesting that is going to be the thing that aligns their incentive, because clearly it hasn't already. That's that's a done deal already.
Say that
Is there another incentive we might be able to align for them in order for them to be able to share the data? I'm not saying you have the answer. I'm just wondering, like, if the incentive might come first rather than then getting the data and then trying to.
I think this really needs to be headed. The only real way to get this data will be through some policy forcing disclosure. This happened at least with crypto assets in Europe. In the new markets in crypto assets regulation, there's mandatory disclosure for the environmental impacts of certain crypto assets like Bitcoin. But yeah, now we're talking about AI, and the EU is also introducing the AI Act, but even though it includes some very limited disclosure requirements for developing large-scale general-purpose AI models, that disclosure just for the training of those models, and we know that actually using those models is where the big part of the impact is nowadays. Even before the mass adoption of AI, the operational stage of these AI models was already responsible for 60% of the impact AI was having, and only 40% was due to the training of these models. Now with mass adoption of this technology, the ratio is likely a lot different. So having disclosure on the training part for certain models is not going to fix our knowledge gap. So we really need to expand this type of regulation. That is, the good news is it is there, but the bad news is I believe for starters, the European Commission doesn't have any interest in expanding it. The European Parliament, I was asking questions about this to the European Commissions already, asking if they thought this is going to be sufficient, especially in the light of the environmental report of big tech, who were just posting awful numbers. And then the European Commission responded with something like, okay, let's just let this regulation first become effective, and then that's already going to take quite a while, especially since they were recently talking about delaying this legislation, and then about evaluating this new legislation a couple of years after it becomes effective. So now we're already 3 years down the line at the very least. And if you at that point start to make new legislations to extend these disclosure requirements, before that becomes effective and applied, and then you're probably at least 8 years further before we get the information we need today to make policies with this. So by the time we have regulation, the AI hype is probably already long gone.
Yeah, man. Is the problem so that I understand the problem? Better. Is the problem does it come down to the grid and the source of the fuel for the generation of the electricity, or is it something intrinsic in the computation and at the data center level that's actually causing or contributing to the problem as well? Is it again, if tomorrow, magical new clean source of energy, free to produce, becomes available, does that solve this problem, or is there a problem actually at the data center level as well?
Well, I think the problem is really at a very fundamental level with AI, where you have this bigger is better dynamic, and bigger is better is just fundamentally unsustainable. From an environmental point of view, less is better. So these two will never combine unless at some point bigger stops being better. But when we will get to that point, and if we will get to that point, that's a big uncertainty. And while this bigger is better continues to be the case, there's actually an incentive to just keep using more resources, which is also driving up adoption, making people use AI more, also driving up resource use. So this is something that is really embedded currently in the incentives surrounding this technology. We previously saw something similar with cryptocurrency mining, where there's a very simple incentive for those miners to, if Bitcoin becomes more valuable, to just keep using more resources to mine Bitcoin, simply because they can make more money by doing so. So these technologies, cryptocurrency mining and AI, they both contain real incentives to just use more resources. And this is coming at a time when actually we need to reduce our resource consumption. If you want to reduce our use of fossil fuels, the best path forward would be to use require less electricity. But instead, we're going in the other direction because now all of the sudden we have this major new source of demand. And I think this is not just a fundamental problem, but also really hard to address because like how can you remove these incentives? Well, with cryptocurrency mining you can, because you actually don't need the energy intensive cryptocurrency mining to run a cryptocurrency, and this has been proven already by other crypto assets out there that are not Bitcoin, and they had massive energy savings as a result. But with AI, it's a different story. With AI, if you're working with generative AI, right now you need those really massive models, and you need to put a lot of energy into training them and running them. And there's just no energy-free alternative to do it. The only hope we can have is that at some point bigger stops being better, or if we all start realizing that these models are extremely limited, and we stop driving up demand for more AI applications, which of course would also mean that the growth in data center infrastructure for AI is going to come to a halt. But for now, actually the power capacity is the limit. The demand for power is growing so fast that tech companies can't find sufficient power anymore to power all these operations. I already said, AI this year is going to be likely adding a power demand equivalent to that of my home country, the Netherlands, globally. So we're this year we're trying to fit in another the Netherlands somewhere in the world in terms of power demand. And we already did that last year. So this is becoming really tough to squeeze in, because it's not like we have that much power capacity just laying around. We do have some dormant infrastructure, but also the dormant infrastructure, we're going to run out of that at some point. I think this is the challenge. Like you need a lot of power, and also you need that power to be available in places where your other infrastructure is also up to par. I mean, if you're going to be doing AI, you need a network infrastructure as well. You need to be able to send and receive large amounts of data. So the ideal places where you can settle these data centers with the massive powerment that they have, they're kind of running out. Google already said they were facing a power capacity crisis simply because they are really running into this problem, which is, you could say this is at least a good news from the environment, that this is putting a brake on the growth in power demand of this new technology. But this is where we're at. The power demand growth is so large that we're running into physical limits in providing that.
That's
power.
Amazing. I was going to ask about on the supply side of energy generation, and if we do develop more or can generate more power through renewables, are we then just falling into the same trap of that efficiency trap of creating more demand on the other side for the use of these AI generation tools? Okay, you mentioned we're hitting a limit. If we do get more efficient in the grid, more efficient in our power production, and even, Lord willing, we do that with better sources of fuel, then we just, again, getting into the same trap of, well, now increased demand over this side of the ledger, and the problem persists. Or is there an off-ramp in there somewhere?
I mean, it just means we can offer more. We can offer more, better AI, and people will probably start using it more as well. So you're probably going to keep being stuck in a very vicious circle there. And like I said, at some point we may hit a ceiling. I mean, at some point every technology does hit a ceiling where we hit the peak hype. Okay, now then the use starts going down, and then we end up a bit lower. But yeah, for now we're definitely not at that point. We just saw actually where we're now escalating things. Like the past years, language models have been driving the growth of AI powered demand. Now, just very recently, we've seen a lot of hype in video generation with AI. Video generation with AI is a lot worse than text generation. It's way more energy intensive. So if we now all start, generating videos with AI next to the things we're already doing with text, it actually has the potential to, at least in the very near future, to create another huge new source of demand. And then we might have some difficulty in facilitating this growth. But then once we do, once we find the ability to build out the infrastructure required to provide this, then it becomes abundant, and people start using maybe more of it, and again using or increasing demand for more resources. So the language models may have peaked a little bit, but now video generation is coming up, and that's a lot worse. So I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet.
Sure. Yeah, man. What would it take to build a smart grid? Like, what can we do on that side of the ledger? What is a smart grid? How might that help the situation in Europe, but also globally?
Yeah, it depends. What would you call a smart grid? So I think there's been like in the data center research, there has been some talk about at least trying to use power sources efficiently, in the sense that we for example try to train AI models when the sun is shining. This is more just smart power management. There's a benefit there because the excess in solar power is probably going to be cheap. So you train your models when there's an abundance of solar power. It's cheap, so it's cost effective, and it's better for the environment than if you're running when the fossil fuels are being used. But
where I live, they pay you to use energy when the sun's shining.
Yeah, well, yeah. So this is where there is at least some good incentives to do that. The sad part is really the majority of the power use of AI is in the operational part, and you can't just shut down. Like, people want ChatGPT to be available during the day, not just when the sun is shining. So that works out a lot less. So this is definitely not a final solution. We can try. In the end, it doesn't really matter where you put these data centers either, because the thing is, if we put them somewhere where we happen to have a lot of renewables, the thing that's going to happen is we're going to be using renewables for those data centers. But the outcome is that somewhere else we'll probably be using more fossil fuels, because we could have used those renewables to clean up our power grid as well. So
sure.
I think this is a really this is a bit of a dead end.
Where do you see hope, or what do you think? Where do you see hope, and what should we be doing now? What's the best next step?
Well, the hope that I saw was Apple's most recent contribution to throw some cold water over the AI hype by highlighting that these language models are extremely limited. I think that realism is part of what we need, where we need to be realistic about what this technology cannot do, not just think about what it can do, but also be very real about what it cannot do. And that itself can help putting a brake on the growth here. I think that is at least something to be optimistic about. It's only a little thing, because at the same time these tech companies are still pouring hundreds of billions in building our new AI infrastructure. So we're probably not reaching the end there anytime soon. But hey, we gotta have something to hold on to. At least in the EU, there is some regulation that mandates certain levels of disclosure for these new technologies like cryptocurrency mining and AI. I think that can also serve as an inspiration. Although, well, not every political environment is currently very suitable for this kind of stuff. but, but in any case, I think that I think that these are some light spots in the darkness.
So many of our listeners and viewers are builders, they are entrepreneurs, VCs, they are investors. What would your message be to people on maybe that side of the ledger, if you like, with regard to your research, what you see happening right now, and where you think we're going in the future?
Yeah, if you're building this kind of stuff, then you have a choice, and well, it depends on your specialty. But I used to be in a very generic environment where we just had some programmers who could build anything you could potentially need, and in that kind of environment, we were in nice word solution agnostic. So, okay, you want a blockchain? Yeah, we can build that, but we can also build something more simple. We also can build AI, but that we don't have to. And I think it would be helpful to like I said before, try to take a step back before you start building out stuff. Go back to the core of what you're trying to solve and think about, okay, what is the best solution for this? Let go of AI and blockchain and any other specific technology, and really try to put yourself in the shoes of the end user, whose problem you're trying to solve and how they are going to be best served with whatever solution you're going to be building, and then base whatever base your decision on what technology to use on that. And probably 9 out of 10 times you will not end up with AI or blockchain. But I think this is, if you're a builder, I think ultimately, also from a business point of view, building solutions that people actually want is in the long run much more beneficial than going along with the hype. So I think long term, sticking to the core, really trying to solve actual problems is going to be way more beneficial than just throwing this new fancy technology on every problem you have. Because there's a real risk that your customers are not going to like it, and then you have an even bigger problem. So, this would be my general recommendation. Just take a step back, think about how do I really create value, and let go of all the fear of missing out and stuff like that.
Tough when money follows the hype as well, though.
Yeah, well, just keep in mind that long term, the most money is in really creating the value. So in the short run, maybe not, but in the long run, definitely. So, but yeah, okay, if you're trying to get rich quick, then I guess then this advice will not apply.
Yeah, from that's the right podcast for get rich quick schemes. Alex, we'd love to ask all of our guests this at the end of the show. Do you have any particularly contrarian views we can learn from, where most people, I mean, you probably shared a couple already today, where most people think we're going one way, but you think we should be going the other, or most people think about the world in a particular way and you have a minority report? Any particularly contrarian, they don't have to be controversial, but contrarian views that you hold that you think we might be able to learn from?
Yeah, I already feel like I'm trying to swim up against a waterfall. So with this type of research, trying to make people more aware of like, hey, there's other consequences to this technology, then it's not just all great. This is only one. And I think I do want to highlight that the sustainability side that we've been talking about is only one dimension. If you have ethical concerns with regard to AI and the environmental concerns, they would only be a tiny bit of that. Because the other parts, we also see how AI can be abused and misused. well, you can just, we can start talking about deepfakes and stuff like that. Those are also very real consequences of this new technology. And I really want people to not just think about the environment, or when you're making this these new applications, but really try to have a broad picture of not just the benefit, but also the cost. And the cost is, like I said, not just the environment; it's the whole spectrum.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a whole podcast episode. We could talk about just that. That is something that deeply concerns me. Actually, is the ethical use of data and production of, especially things like deepfakes and.
There's so much to unpack there. Just look at how these tech companies have been training their models in the first place. That is already itself a big ethical concern. How there's been so many complaints about copyright infringement. How they just that's one thing where there's all this data, all these interactions that you have with ChatGPT. Do they get stored? Where do they get stored? How are they used? There's so many things to talk about. You definitely need to do a lot more episodes on this if you want to cover it all.
Yeah, man, we'll have to have you back to talk about that. For now, if people want to hear more from you or learn more about your research, where can they find you online?
Well, the best place to go would be the Digiconomist website. If there's anything relevant happening, then it will also always be posted on there. I just don't post a lot because I'm doing academic research. So if I'm posting something once a year, it's already a lot. But if you're looking for some more immediate comments on stuff like environmental reports of big tech companies releasing, then it's probably good to keep track of my social media, which you can also find through my website Digiconomist. So I would just recommend again go there and then follow me on social media as well. LinkedIn is a good spot. That's it.
Certainly, Alex. We'll check all that in the show notes as well. And again, really, really appreciate you opening our eyes to some of the serious things that are going on and the things you're bringing to light with the research. Really appreciate it. Good on you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain, and we love bringing you great guests like Alex, and hope we've inspired you to think more about Web3, about AI, about technology, about the future, about the environment, and how we might build better tech together. As always, please like, subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word, and join us again next week for another great episode of Off Chain. Till then, take care.